Hi, I'm Darcy Kitching, sharing with you a presentation I put together for the Safe Routes National Summit on November 17th, 2022. So here's a quick look at the presentation I'll be making for you. First, a tale of two school districts, how the two school districts in Boulder County differ in their allocation of resources for safe routes to school, and how that influenced the way that I approached the research that I'll report on here, which comprises part of my doctoral dissertation. Next, I'll go over the design of my study, which came to be known locally as the Boulder County School Travel Study. Then I'll share some results from the first phase of the research, which I conducted with transportation professionals, followed by some results from the second phase of the research, which was done with students and parents in both school districts in Boulder County. And finally, I'll summarize with some answers to this question: is more data better for decision making when it comes to safe routes to school? So the Boulder Valley School District sits in the southern half of Boulder County, which is kind of rectangular, almost like the state of Colorado. It has almost 30,000 students and has been actively investing in safe routes to school since even earlier than 2006. But formally since 2006. There are now 2 full-time employees in the transportation department dedicated to safe routes, and district administrators consider this to be an important function of their transportation department. I'll be referring to this district as BVSD going forward. The St. Vrain Valley School District has a slightly larger student population at just over 31,000 students, and it sits in the northern half of the county. Unlike BVSD, St. Vrain doesn't currently invest time, money, or other resources in Safe Routes to School programming itself, but does partner with the county government, where a full-time employee oversees Safe Routes grants and programming for the district's schools. The St. Vrain Transportation Department focuses on busing, but the district's planning department does mention active transportation infrastructure in its school siting policies, so their support is more indirect than in BVSD. Now, both school districts have been part of a unique program that was developed by BVSD's Safe Routes to School team in 2009. It's called Trip Tracker. Now in its 13th year, this program was designed to appeal to middle school students with the Trip Tracker Dude logo that you can see here. And it provides a cash incentive for students at participating schools to take so-called green trips that are self-reported by parents at the end of each month. This program involves building lots and lots of partnerships with local businesses that get reimbursed for 50 cents on every Trip Tracker dollar that they collect. So Trip Tracker has been kind of the defining program for Safe Routes to School in Boulder County. Schools that participate in Trip Tracker are the schools that have received Safe Route support from the district or the county respectively, and are the ones whose programs have been evaluated. So for evaluation purposes, both BVSD and the county for St. Vrain have sent out the standardized Safe Routes to School parent survey. This is something that was created by the National Center for Safe Routes to School and is standardized and used around the country. Now, this was really the impetus for my study, the results of the fall 2019 parent surveys. BVSD sent them out to 4 elementary schools with a total of 1,760 students and got 423 parent responses, or 24%. The county sent surveys to 8 elementary schools in St. Vrain Valley School District with a total of 3,612 students and got 299 responses, or 8%. What caught my attention about these surveys was the comments left by about 40% of respondents in both districts. And it turns out that those comments were the most useful part of the survey for Safe Routes coordinators at BVSD and at the county. What was most interesting to me about these comments was how they illustrated the complexity of families' lives, complexity that is not easily captured in a short survey. For example, here are two sample comments from parents. This first one from a BVSD parent who talks about being divorced and living farther from their child's school than the other parent does. They bring up how expensive housing is and how unsafe the streets are around their home for their child. And then this second comment from a St. Vrain parent indicates limitations of the survey itself and how they weren't able to communicate what they actually do, which is park and walk. They wanted to choose more than one mode in the survey, but it didn't allow that. These themes were repeated throughout the comments, along with lots of other themes that jumped out to me as a researcher. I got really curious about how Safe Routes to School program coordinators, transportation planners, and engineers learn from the community, not just parents, but students too, and how learning more from families might lead to some innovation. To get into what I did, I'll quickly go over the three main questions in my research. First, how are transportation professionals using data and information to support active transportation to schools and other places? Second, what do students and parents, especially those whose voices aren't often heard, want those professionals to know about their weekday experiences? And third, how could that additional information influence what gets supported and built in terms of transportation? So I designed a three-phase study where I would interview transportation professionals throughout Boulder County, then learn from a diverse group of students and caregivers in both school districts using two interactive methods, and then take that information back to the transportation people to try to understand whether providing more detailed intergenerational data is helpful in their decision making. In my initial interviews with transportation professionals, I asked them about the main sources of data and information that they use in their work, which are listed on the right in this diagram. And I realize you can't see all of them because of where I'm positioned here, but I'll point out a few. I'm teasing apart data and information here because this includes everything that professionals told me they reference in their work, from just observing what's going on as a member of the community to counting bicycles and cars or conducting surveys and focus groups. Now, just follow the colorful ribbons across the screen here. You'll notice that the types and sources of data and information are somewhat different for different professionals. Most of the people I interviewed were Safe Routes to School coordinators or transportation planners. They're listed on the left in green and purple, respectively. The green ribbons connect with typical sources of information used by BVSD and the County Safe Routes Coordinator, like the Safe Routes parent surveys, teacher tallies, which are counts the teachers keep when they ask students, how did you get to school today? And they raise their hand for walking or biking or being driven in a car. And then the monthly trip tracker surveys as well are a source of data for them. And other things like bicycle counts at schools, maps of the areas around schools. Now, what's most interesting here, I think, is that the transportation planners, the purple ribbons you can see, are using the widest variety of data and information, collaborating with many different partners, including with Safe Routes to School coordinators. Now, planners and engineers are often the people making decisions about how to change infrastructure around schools, so they are essential partners in creating safe routes for people to walk and bicycle. Now, even though they're using lots of different data and information sources, so much of this work comes down to just understanding how people feel about their experience. This quote from a transportation planner captures what I heard from many of my interviewees. It's interesting, this person said, it's interesting that a lot of our work is about perception. I always say we can go by the data, we can build all these great things using volumes, transit data, and all these different things. We can go to the census and really figure out where people are living and where they're trying to travel to and from. But at the end of the day, it's like, so this person hears often, I had a hard time getting from here to there, or I feel like this intersection was unsafe. And so that's kind of how we focus our resources. Now, the photograph here is an example of a Safe Routes to School project in Boulder that resulted from a local transportation planner observing that students and families were cutting across a park on their way to and from an elementary school, which is right behind these trees, and avoiding other less direct routes. And the people had cut through the park, and the path the people had cut through the park got really muddy and it was damaging to the environment. So the planner integrated paving of that path into a Safe Routes to School grant that they were applying for some changes to the street in front of this park. So this planner just added on the pavement of that path based on their perception of need. Now, when I asked the professionals what data and information they wish they had about students and families' weekday travel, I heard these 4 themes primarily. So psychographics, this was the most common theme, which means parents and students' attitudes, their fears, their motivations, and the reasons that they make their travel behavior, their travel choices. The second theme was missing voices, what students and families who don't often participate in planning processes want and need. So these would be people who are just commonly not heard in the planning process. Theme 3, was actual routes. So the planners and transportation professionals I spoke with want to understand students' everyday bike and pedestrian routes and how many students are traveling on those routes. It's pretty easy to go out and count cars on roads, but it's a lot harder to track and find how students are getting to school by other means. And then theme 4, and this one was really interesting to me, this idea of trips not taken. What are students and parents not doing because they can't get there and home again? And that's really an equity issue along with the missing voices. So then, when I worked with students and caregivers, I tried to gather that kind of information. My partners and I recruited 44 families from around the county, and to make sure we were capturing the missing voices, we worked with nonprofits and Spanish language interpreters to ensure we'd have a high proportion of low and moderate income families, as well as Latino families and others who are typically underrepresented. Our process involved 3 things. We paid both students and caregivers to take part in this project. We gave them a meaningful incentive. We asked them to use their senses and imagine the best possible school trips that they could. And we asked them to deeply examine their school trips and weekday travel behavior, to do some meaningful introspection, to reveal the patterns in their lives. The imagination exercise was a perfect place to start. We asked family groups to work together to build a model of their perfect school trip. So, what they would want in the ideal world. Now, their visions fell into 2 categories. 24% shared a fantasy, like the model in the top photo, which shows a zip line going directly from school to the family's house, and from the family's house to the school. But the majority of participants, 76%, imagined simply having more fun, more connection, more access to nature on their trips to and from school. The bottom photo, the model in the bottom photo here shows the path that this family already walks on every day, but it's just enhanced with friends and go-karts, places to eat, water features, animals, all kinds of fun things along the way. So these models revealed participants' values for safety, belonging, and efficiency. They all wanted their school trips to be a much less stressful and easier part of their day. After the model building exercise, we had both students and caregivers complete detailed map-based surveys using a platform called Maptionnaire. This required lots of introspection and revealed a lot of that psychographic information that transportation professionals were looking for about why people make the choices that they do and how they feel about those choices. Now, for this presentation, I just grabbed a few examples that illustrate some of the themes that came out in that map-based survey. So, for example, students in our sample, which is not representative of the county, but rather is made up of people who responded to our outreach, so students and parents who wanted to talk about their transportation experiences, 32% of those students walk and bike to school, to and from school, at least sometimes, which is a lot more than the national average of about 10%. What's interesting is that our sample was evenly divided between students who attend their assigned neighborhood schools and students who attend schools of choice. So 25% of the students who go to neighborhood schools walk or bike at least sometimes, but only 8% of the students who attend choice schools do so. 50% of all the students in our sample say they would like to travel to school independently, but 68% say they're not able to do so for the reasons in the graph on the right, which is divided between St. Vrain on the left in blue and BVSD on the right in green. So you can see things like school is too far away, which was the most common reason among BVSD students for not walking and bicycling. It takes too long. That had some parity between the two school districts. More students in St. Vrain thought it, or slightly, this is also pretty well paired, feeling like it was unsafe to walk or bike to school. And then I thought this was interesting. More students in BVSD said their parents didn't want them to walk or bike to school. And then the final one is, I don't want to. And that was primarily high school students, and that also had parity between the two districts. About the same percentage of students were using that reason. So we also captured how students and parents feel on their school trips. And more than half of the parents said they feel stressed when they drive, but 85% of students who travel actively, walking or bicycling, reported feeling happy, calm, or excited on that trip. Now, the maps that our participants produced are fascinating because they reveal the complexity of families' lives, which even people who are making these trips often don't stop to think about. This mother was genuinely shocked to see the gigantic red triangle that she drives almost every day in the picture on the right. And again, I'm sorry, I'm blocking a little bit of this. But it's a 40-mile, 90-minute trip. You can kind of connect that bottom part of the triangle. And this parent said, in the morning, we just go, go, go. We don't really think, what's our route? And turned to her student who was participating and said, look at all this I have to do in the morning. There was a sense of exasperation once they saw it on the map. We also asked participants to draw their maps by hand before they drew them on the tablets that we gave them for the survey. This mom's hand-drawn map shows her many back and forth trips on weekdays, including her two children's after-school activities, her own work trip, and her carpool trips to take her children and a neighbor student to their schools. This parent said it's so much driving, and it's so much driving for them because they are open enrolling or going to choice schools that are not in their neighborhood. They recognize that there's a school in the neighborhood that one of their children could attend, but they're choosing for a variety of reasons. And again, the same thing happened with this parent. They turned to their student and said, "Look what I do! Look what I do for you every day." It was almost as if these parents were kind of awakened to these patterns that they just kind of carry out almost unconsciously every day. Now, one of the most interesting findings from this study, I think, is how the perception of safety differs between students and adults. Just take a quick look at the chart on the right. We asked both adults and students on a scale of 0 to 100, how safe do you feel walking, bicycling, or taking the bus in your area? But we also asked the adults, how safe do you think those activities are for your children? Now, what you see in the chart are averages for participants from both school districts. How safe adults feel is in blue. How safe they think their kids are is in red, and then the students' feeling of safety is in green. So in both school districts, parents think their students are much less safe than the students think they are, which really points to the importance of understanding parents' concerns and students' eagerness for independence. This is what I believe is really the sweet spot for intervention and for innovation as well, finding ways to help parents feel more comfortable letting their children travel independently. And I pulled out a couple of quotes here. One from a parent saying that they'd be happy to ride their bike if they felt safer and understood better routes. So if they had access to more information about that. And then this student said something that many students said in the study. I wish I could walk with my friends. I just wish I could travel with my friends. I wish I could walk, bike, carpool with my friends. And so there was a lot of expression on students' parts, a desire for independence. Now, the fourth theme that we heard from transportation professionals about trips not taken really came up in the context of access to after-school activities. This is an equity gap that several students spoke to. They wanted to go to an activity, but they didn't have transportation. This is another area that is ideal for targeting with an intervention. So these two students, for example, wanted to participate in sports and in an arts class, but just were not able to get there or home or both. So to wrap up, is more community data better for safe routes to school decision making? Well, the answer is maybe. If you can afford the cost of providing incentives, which is essential for engaging a diverse array of participants. And those incentives can vary. We paid our participants with cash cards, but a lot of other incentives are out there. And then, of course, if you have the connections and the capacity to work with people who speak other languages or have special needs, really making sure that those missing voices are there, that representation is really there. And if you have the tools and the capacity to manage large amounts of data, this kind of work generates lots and lots of ideas and stories and feedback to analyze. It's taken me several months to analyze all the data that we collected. And if the data that you're collecting is meaningful and relevant to the people who can write grants and make decisions about changes to the environment or programs to better serve local needs. So there needs to be that partnership with local decision makers to create the interventions that people are seeking. And finally, where the support and resources for safe routes to school are high, more data can obviously be a great thing because there's capacity there to implement something using that data. The institutional support for safe routes to school in BVSD means that projects are always in the works with various partners and that they're always getting done. But in the St. Vrain Valley School District, that's not necessarily the case because the support for safe routes to school is coming from the county, and there isn't that institutional buy-in that's going to create just an ongoing opportunity for innovation in that space. So finally, just to share one last little thing about the study. This is kind of our diffusion model for the study. So with the county, I carried out this study at the regional level, really to collect some baseline data, take an intergenerational approach, which was unusual, really do a broad-based initial survey, look for geographic diversity, specifically geographic diversity and demographic diversity. And we were testing these methodologies to see what they would yield. And hopefully that will inform the next steps. Now we understand that this needs to be refined for local needs. So collecting this data at the regional level was useful for a kind of a baseline and a initial analysis. But what I heard from the transportation planners was the importance of really identifying those local opportunities for this kind of engagement and collaborating with school districts, municipalities, and local organizations at the school level or the neighborhood level to get this kind of data around a project area. And then that in turn can inform scalable practices and go back to the regional level that the county can then start to use these methodologies in an ongoing way and create more and more opportunities for intervention and for innovation. So thank you very much. I appreciate your attention to this presentation. And if you have any questions about it or want any more information about the study, please feel free to reach out to me, darcy.kitching@ucdenver.edu. I thank you, and I hope to hear from you.